Hi, students. I'd like to take you on a little adventure today. It's actually a journey of America's music. I want you to go up and enable the content first so that you can see the video clips that I put into this presentation. All right, so let's start off with this. When slaves were brought over, it was a terrible time in the history of the United States. Um, and you know that slaves were brought over with nothing. They couldn't bring anything with them. They were separated from their families and all of that. But they did bring within them their culture, right? You always take with you, wherever you go, your values, your faith, your beliefs, your music ability, your artistic ability, all those things go with you wherever you go. And they brought those here with them. And when they were working hard out in the fields, they started chanting with each other or doing call and response, and even doing field hollers and so on. And those mixed with European hymns became gospel music, okay? And it ended up that those chanting and those songs that they were singing out in the fields or work songs, even prison songs, inspired us many years later into our civil rights and the anti-war movement and all of those things, as well as being used for entertainment in different types of nightclubs or juke joints and that kind of thing. So it's really quite a history that goes all the way back to this time. Radios were key for getting music dispersed. You could be sitting in your house with your family, hearing music made in all different places. And this is how people, in Elvis's time, how he heard Black music and he heard gospel music. And in hearing those early on Sunday mornings and stuff, it's going to influence the music that he creates. Okay. And so the musicians back here were thought of as kind of journalists writing about what's going on with events or with society or with politics or, anything, the day-to-day events going on. They were thought of as the journalists of their time, and they were talking about America's stories through their songs. So I'm not trying to capture every type of artist, musician, style, and all of that in this presentations, but I do want to touch on a few different genres that I think you'll enjoy. All right, so slave owners viewed Christianity as sort of the civilizing force, and they wanted to take their slaves to hear about it and to kind of control them better. I'll say that. Okay. Anyways, but the slaves actually found something in their faith that the slave owners could never have imagined. And they related to the martyred Christ. They related to being torn apart from their family and their home and their culture, and having to work so hard and being persecuted and all of that. So those same songs that they might have sang in church, they would take an entirely different sound when they would sing them out in the fields. So that gave this different sound to music, even though maybe not entirely different meaning by any means. All right, so in 1863, the Emancipation Proclamation freed slaves in the Confederate States, but following the Reconstruction, Southern states enforced segregation. And this was a time of institutionalized racism, substandard education, dead-end employment, Jim Crow laws, and a very, very oppressive society. Out of that came the blues. And the blues sort of develop or parallels and reflects the Black experience. This music spoke both from the heart and to the heart of these that are being oppressed and impoverished, whether they were bound to rural poverty, whether they were sharecropping, whether they were had moved and migrated to more urban areas. The work was equally as hard. And the blues was especially popular in the Mississippi Delta and Southeast Texas, and moved towards New Orleans. And that's where we really think of the blues taking hold and moving from there on up. Okay. So it was from the lowest rung of the social ladder that the blues would provide to be the heart of musical development. The blues thrived wherever hard work and hardship prevailed, whether it was in tobacco plantations, mining, factory towns, industrial cities, work camps, prisons, and even the underworld of gambling dens, saloons, and brothels. But also, you heard blues in other places. You heard it at house parties, at picnics, cafes, and barbecues, and barbershops, and radio stations, or railroad stations, and parks and street corners. This era brought forth ragtime and jazz and gospel music also in an explosion of Black American musical creativity. All right, about the same time jazz began, and it had its roots in the American South as well. It's hard to define the moment when jazz took on its own style. The blues were one of the building blocks, and it shared a common lineage in the musical culture of African Americans. Some say that jazz formed because the Creole musicians in New Orleans needed to jazz up the blues and ragtime music. If New Orleans was a birthplace of jazz, then Chicago is where it grew and developed. Back in the teens and 20s, Chicago was the most dangerous city in the United States. It was packed with dance halls and speakeasies and juke joints, cabarets and brothels. These types of places needed something like jazz as a soundtrack. In the 1920s, phonograph and records were the medium for popularizing jazz and blues. However, the American record labels had developed a strategy of selling music made by Black artists strictly to the Black community. They even marked them as race records. These records went virtually unnoticed by others until the 1950s, when more democratic radio was available to everyone. All right, so what I brought in for you to listen to is, this is just kind of a clip that gives you an example of call and response. Okay. And then this one is Robert Johnson, and you can click on him, and he is known as America's blues guitarist, singer, songwriter. He had a short life, only lived to 27 years old, but he left a huge impact in blues. He's considered the master of blues, particularly the Delta blues, meaning that area, Louisiana and so on. Okay. There are a lot of more current artists that love his music and love the style of jazz and blues and brought that into their music. People like Bob Dylan, Eric Clapton, Keith Richards, Robert Plant, many, many others. They love his lyrics and his musicianship, and it's influenced in their work as well. On this next slide, what I put here, it's about a 15-minute video, and it's awesome. It just kind of walks you through this idea of from slave music to gospel music to blues and to jazz. It gives you that all. So watch that. You'll get a really great little history in 15 minutes. And then if you like it, you can turn on Ken Burns. He's got incredible documentaries on all kinds of things, including baseball and just everything. But he does one on jazz. It's amazing. Blues. And he does one on country music. So if you ever get a chance to watch those, they're really incredible. All right. So like I said, it was the early blues artists that have passed away a long time ago, but they leave these influences that groups like the Rolling Stones and Led Zeppelin, maybe you don't think of them as using the early blues in that way, but just wait and listen to them. Listen to the early ones first on, like Robert Johnson, and then listen to these, and you will hear influences. All right, we are going to continue to another presentation that I call Part B, and take a look at some other genres. All right, students, I'll see you soon.